I've been hiking solo for about 6 years now. I'm comfortable enough in the wilderness that I don't need to stick to main trails anymore, which is probably what got me into this situation in the first place. This happened last October in the Monongahela National Forest in West Virginia. I'd driven up from Virginia for a long weekend, planning to hit some of the more remote sections that didn't see much traffic. The weather was perfect, mid-50s if I had to guess. Overcast, but not rainy. I was looking forward to some real solitude. I was maybe 4 hours into the hike when I reached what I can only describe as a gorge. It wasn't some massive canyon or anything, but it was deep enough, probably 30 or 40 feet down to a rocky bottom with a small creek running through it. Not a guaranteed death if you fell, but you'd definitely break something, and the walls looked impossible to climb with all that loose shale and overhang. There was this massive fallen oak wedged between both sides at a slight angle. It was pretty thick. The bark was worn smooth from weather and probably other hikers using it as a bridge. I inspected it for a few minutes to make sure it was sturdy, then decided it looked solid enough for me. I took my time getting across, trying to maintain focus. I safely reached the other side, and by the time I was back on solid ground, I realized I'd gotten a really nice adrenaline rush from the balancing act. But then I heard this rhythmic thunking sound behind me. I turned around, and there was a guy on the other side of the gorge, maybe 10 feet from where the tree met the bank. He was older, definitely in his 50s, wearing this ratty camo jacket and old-looking jeans. He also had a scraggly beard that made him kind of look like your stereotypical lumberjack. It took me a second to realize what he was holding. It was an axe, a full-size axe. Maybe he really was a lumberjack, but I couldn't think. I was still in shock at the sight of it. He walked right over to the base of the tree and started swinging his axe at it. I shouted across at him, asking what the hell he was doing. He didn't even look up, he just kept swinging. To my horror, I watched as one of his swings landed a little deeper than the others. The tree shifted slightly. I yelled louder, telling him to stop, and that I'd just crossed the gorge on that thing. It dawned on me that this guy probably already knew that, and he was trying to strand me on the other side. He didn't show any signs of stopping, so I yelled increasingly insulting things at him, stuff that didn't even make sense. I finally yelled that I'd need to cross back to the other side, and that's when he finally looked up at me and said, "That's not my problem." He said it so casually, like I'd asked him about the weather. I don't know why, but his casual tone infuriated me, and I admit I kind of lost it a little. I started full-on screaming at him. I said some nasty things, and in hindsight, that probably wasn't the brightest decision. I can't remember exactly what, but something I must have said hit a nerve because he stopped swinging the axe abruptly. He actually set it down on the ground before taking a few steps closer to the edge. I could see his face more clearly after that, and it was not a pleasant sight. His eyes were sunken and dark almost, like the skin around them was dark too, if that makes any sense. He leaned over the edge and told me something that I'll never forget. "I know these woods a lot better than you do." Something about the way he said it scared me. Not threatening exactly, but certain, like he was stating a fact I'd be stupid to argue with. We stared at each other for what felt like forever. Then he picked up the axe, turned around, and walked back into the trees. I didn't say anything after him. What was there to say? I stood there trying to process what had happened. The tree was still wedged in place, but I could tell it wasn't stable anymore. The edge on his side was splintered and cracked. I wanted to cross back to the other side right then and there, but there was no way I was entrusting my weight to that tree now. I pulled out my phone, but it had zero service. I decided to cut the hike short. I was mad for sure, but I was also genuinely spooked. I think anyone else in my position would have been too. Something about that encounter felt wrong in a way I couldn't articulate. I started walking downstream, figuring I'd find another crossing and it would take me back in the direction I'd come from anyway. But I was dead wrong. I walked for what must have been an hour, and the gorge only got deeper. I was pretty sure the gap was widening too. I kept thinking I'd find a spot where I could cross, but every turn just revealed more impossible terrain. To make matters worse, the sun was starting to drop. I was beginning to panic. It was getting dark, and I was miles from my car in the opposite direction I needed to go. I started seriously considering whether I'd have to climb down into the gorge and back out, as insane as that seemed. Just then, I stumbled on what looked like a campsite. It was sitting in this little clearing with a fire pit that looked recently used. At first, I was relieved that maybe there was a fellow camper or hiker that could help me, but the more I looked around, the more wrong it felt. I realized that there were these carvings on the surrounding trees, not like initials or anything recognizable, just these deep gouges and symbols. There were also a bunch of weird objects scattered around, like rusted tools and pieces of cloth tied to branches, what looked like animal bones arranged in patterns. It was freaky. As soon as I saw that stuff, I basically hightailed it out of there. I was about twice as scared as I had been 2 minutes ago, which was saying something. And then, as if it couldn't get any worse, I started hearing sounds behind me, stalking me. Footsteps, or something like footsteps. Every time I spun around though, everything went silent. I started thinking some kind of predator was trailing me. I picked up my pace, hoping whatever was behind me would lose interest. But no. If anything, the sounds only got louder and honestly a little closer. What happened next is still the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced. As soon as I heard the next sound, I looked over my shoulder for like the 20th time and caught a glimpse of someone ducking behind a tree. A person. I froze and scanned the trees, and I realized there wasn't just one. There was another figure further to the left. They'd fanned out. I was being herded. I don't know what made me realize they'd given up on hiding, but suddenly I could hear them moving more openly. I saw what looked like a pipe or a club in one of their hands, and that was it. I just started running, knowing I couldn't play dumb for much longer. And the exact thing I was dreading happened. They started chasing after me, clearly not concerned with being stealthy anymore. I can't explain how scary it was. I didn't even know what they wanted. I was in the middle of the woods, lost, and the sun had almost set. I felt like I was in a life or death situation, which is probably how I was able to run so fast for so long. I ran faster than I knew I could, and definitely faster than I'd ever run before. One of the people behind me started screaming. Not words, just screams, like war cry type screams. The stuff of nightmares, and I mean that. I kept running. The gorge was still on my left, and just when I felt myself slowing down out of exhaustion, I saw another fallen tree. It was much smaller than the first one had been, but I didn't have a choice. Without thinking, I mounted it and started making my way across.